Welcome to the podcast to Let the Prophets Speak. Today we continue our study of the second book of Kings, that is Melachim Beis. We are in the middle of chapter 10 as we read of the path of blood and murder and mayhem that is being left by Yehu as he zealously avenges at least what he perceives to be what God wants, the vengeance against the house of Achav, the house of Ahab, after he executed the king of, after he assassinated Yehoram, the king of the north, and assassinated Achazyahu, the king of the south, then assassinated Izebel, the queen mother of the north. Then he went on to kill the 70 descendants worthy of kingship of Achav, of Ahab, and Shomron. He had their heads chopped off. Then he went and murdered all of the nobles, all of anyone that was even acquainted with the house of Achav, anyone that had power in the house of Achav. Then he went and murdered the entire family of anyone even remotely related to Achav. And then he went and killed 42 relatives of Achazyahu, the king of the south. But it's not over yet. Vayelech misham, and he went from there. Vayimsa et Yehonadab ben Rechav likrato, and he found Yehonadab ben Rechav, who was a Cani, a descendant of Jethro. He found him coming likraso, who was coming towards him likraso to greet him by Varcheu, and he blessed him by Yomer Elav, and he said to him, Hayesh et levavcha ya'ashar ka'asher levavi im levavecha. Are you clear with me? Are you good with me as I am good with you? In other words, are you going to be loyal to me? Are you with me? Or maybe you're coming to fight with me, right? Where's your heart? Vayomer Yehonadab yesh vayesh. Yes and yes. In other words, I am with you just like you are with me. Tana es yadcha, give me your hand. Vayiten yado, he gave him his hand. Vayaleu ilav al-merkava, and he brought him with him onto his chariot. Yehonadab ben Rechav is famous for something that happened a couple hundred years down the line in the time of Yirmiyahu, in the time of Jeremiah. Long after the northern kingdom is gone, the descendants of Yehonadab ben Rechav had at that time had already moved into Jerusalem, which at this time is part of the southern kingdom, and Yirmiyahu praised them, and God praised them for their abstention from wine, and God used them as an example of loyalty, because their ancestor, this Yehonadab ben Rechav we're speaking about here, told them to abstain from wine, and they kept that custom for years. And God then criticized the Jewish people for not abstaining from the prohibitions that God had given the Jewish people. But this Yehonadab here is now teaming up with Yehu, and it would seem that this is because Yehonadab sees Yehu as an opponent of Baal, right? Opponent of the pagan god Baal, and he is therefore, and he sees Yehu as the instrument of God, which on a level, of course, he is, to destroy and get rid of Baal from the people of Israel. So Vayomer, and he says, L'cha iti, come with me, ure'ei b'kinasi ladonai, and see my jealousness, my zeal for God. Vayakivu oso b'rechbo, and he had him ride in his chariot. This zeal for God, kinasi la Hashem, which we see in this verse here, is a very reminiscent verse of Yehu talking about himself as if he was Eliyahu, because this was a term that, of course, Eliyahu had used as well, right, in his zeal for God, right? And Yehu thinks of himself now, this zeal, this mishuganis, this craziness that he has, which is causing him to bring about such wanton destruction and murder, is now, in his mind, zeal for God. So now Yehu is going to go and take a step against Baal, and we're about to read how that's going to happen, and he has an ally, Yehonadab. So it's hard to know sometimes whether we should be sympathetic to Yehu and his goals, because his goals on some level seem to be laudable goals, getting rid of Baal and so on. But on another level, they are highly questionable, to say the least. And it's similar to what we found with Eliyahu when we discussed Eliyahu. If you go back to those podcasts, we discussed, Eliyahu had disproven Baal at Har Carmel. He had a tremendous victory, but then, without having been requested by God at all, Eliyahu then went ahead and had all of the Nevi'ei Baal, the prophets of the Baal, slaughtered, rather than even making an attempt to convert them and bring them back. If you recall, that is in contrast to just several chapters ago when Elisha had the chance, when the enemies, the people of Aram, were there. They were trapped and helpless, and the king wanted to kill them because they were the enemies. Elisha said, "No, that's not the way you treat the prisoners of war. You treat them nicely. You give them to eat and drink and send them home, right?" But here we see differently. We see a different kind of behavior. Now, Baal is again on the run, right? Yehu is taking vengeance for God. He has killed out the entire family of Achav, right? Because of their adherence and their and because of their allegiance to Baal. But then he continued to go on. Vayavo Shomron, he came to Shomron. Vayachet kol hanisharim la'achav b'Shomron ad hishmido, and he struck down all of those that remained for Achav. This is the third time the verse says he struck down anyone remaining, which means there were still a few remnants remaining. The death and destruction continues despite the fact that the house of Achav has been, for the most part, wiped out. If there's anyone left that had any connection, he killed them too. Kidvar Adonai asher diber Eliyahu, by the word of God, as he had spoken to Eliyahu. And I would venture to suggest that fulfilling what he thought was the word of God that was spoken to Eliyahu. Vayikbotz Yehu es kol ha'am, and now Yehu gathered the entire nation. Vayomer aleim, and he said, Achav ovad et habal me'at, Yehu yahavdenu harbe. Achav the king, he served the Baal a little bit. He was just a minor worshiper of Baal. Yehu, I'm going to be an even better worshiper of Baal. I'm going to show you how to worship Baal. Now, Yehu is doing this, as we'll see in a moment, to trick the people into gathering in honor of Baal and then to get to then slaughter anyone who supports Baal. However, this tactic is highly questionable because Yehu now is going to have to pretend to worship Baal. Is this a legitimate tactic? This is a highly questionable tactic. If one can go, can do that in order, you can think for yourself, is this a legitimate tactic, to go to worship Baal in order to destroy it rather than tackle it head on? I'm not so sure that it is legitimate, but let's see. Va'ata, and now, Kol Nevi'ei Baal, all of the prophets of Baal, Kol Ovdav, anyone who serves the Baal, V'chol Kohanav, and any of the priests of Baal, Kiru Elai Ish, right? Kiru Elai, call them all to me. Ish al yipakeh, don't leave anyone out. Ki zevach gadol li Baal, because I have a great a sacrifice I'm going to give to Baal. Kol asher yipakeh lo yichye. Anyone who's not count, who doesn't come, in other words, who counts among those who does not show up, will not live. V'yehu asabi akba. Yehu was doing this in a sneaky way. Leman ha'avidus of the Baal, not because he really wanted to worship Baal, but because he wanted to eventually destroy the worshippers of Baal. Vayomer Yehu kadshu atzara leBaal vayikro. I make a special occasion, call out and sanctify a special day, a holiday for Baal, and they went and they called a special holiday. That's what all of these prophets of Baal did when they gathered together. Vayishlach Yehu b'chol Yisrael, and Yehu sent messengers across the entire Israel, entire nation, the northern kingdom of Israel. Vayavo kol ovdei Baal, and all of those that worship Baal came. V'lo nishar ishar shalaba, there wasn't a single person that didn't show up. Vayavo beis Baal, and they came to the house of Baal, the temple of Baal. Vayimolei beis Baal peh peh, and the entire temple of Baal was full end to end. Vayomer lasher hamel tocha, and he said to the one who is in charge of of keeping the garments that were in the temple of Baal, which were worn, the worshiping garments. He said, "Hotze levush lecholov de Baal, bring out clothing so that all the worshippers of Baal can wear clothing." By Yotze lem malbush, and he brought out all of their clothing. Presumably, this would identify those who worship Baal and differentiate them from those who don't. Vayavo Yehu v'Yehonadab ben Rechov beis Baal, and Yehu and Yehonadab ben Rechov came to the temple of Baal. Vayomer lov de Baal, and they said to the Baal, Chavshu re'o, right? Look around. Pen yesh bo imacha me'avdei Adonai. Is there anyone here that worships God? Right? We only want real pure, real Baal worshippers. Get rid of anyone who worships God. Ki imov de Baal avadam. I only want people that are faithful to Baal alone. Vayavo lasos vachim. It's amazing that they didn't have suspicion what was going to happen, but okay. Vayavo lasos vachim. Well, they really didn't have a choice, to be honest. That would probably explain it, because if they would have left, then Yehu had already said he would have had them killed. So they came to make all kinds of sacrifices and offerings. Yehu samlo b'chutz shmonim ish, and Yehu placed 80 guards at the doors to the temple. Vayomer ha'isha asher yimolit min ha'anashim. If any one of these people leaves, asher ani mevi al yedechem, those people that I'm bringing here, to you, nafsho tachas nafsho, right? If any one of a person escapes, then the person who allowed him to escape will be killed. In other words, do not allow any one of these people to escape. Was when he finished bringing the sacrifice. So here you have Yehu actually bringing a sacrifice to Baal in order to fool them. Highly questionable activity. Vayomer Yehu loratzim v'shalishim, and then he said to the guards and to the officers, Bohu hakum, come strike them down. Ish al yetzei, do not allow a single person to leave. Vayakum lefi charav, and he struck them down by the sword. Vayashlichu haratzim v'ashalishim v'yecho adir beis Baal. And then he he sent, after they struck down all of those people, then the guards and the officers went into the inner sanctum of the temple of Baal. Vayotzio es matzevos beis Baal ve'servu, and they took out the altars and the matzevos here. It's naturally not matzevot. The way it's written is matzevot, which would more like mean the support pillars, and burnt them down, or maybe not support pillars, but pillars that were built for like honor, as part of the worship structure of the Baal. Vayitzu et matzevas Baal, and they smashed the pillars of Baal. Vayitzu et beis Baal, and they smashed the entire temple. Vayisimuhu lemotzaos adayom, and they turned it into motzaos, which is a place people go to the bathroom. They made it a latrine. Until today, it remains a latrine in Samaria. Vayishmad Yehu es Baal meYisrael, and thus Yehu destroyed Baal from Israel. So the goal is laudable. The method by which he achieved that goal, not so. But and case in point is the verse we're about to read. Don't think Yehu was such a great guy, because Rak Chatoi Yeravam ben Nevat asher hechties Yisrael, the sins of Jeroboam of Yeravam, that he made the people of Israel sin. The one who made the golden calves and the temples of the golden calves, even though those were officially dedicated to God, but they were something that God absolutely did not want. Lo sar Yehu me'achareim. Yehu did not take them down. Eglei Hazav, the golden calves, which were in the two locations of the temples, Asher Beit El, Asher Bedan, which were in Beit El and Dan. Now, Vayomer Yehu, Vayomer Adonai El Yehu, and God said to Yehu, Yan Asher Hativosa, Lasos Hayashar Be'enai. Because and the commentaries point out, the traditional commentaries say, when it says God spoke to Yehu, it doesn't mean they spoke to him directly, because Yehu himself was not a prophet, although the simple meaning is that he actually did speak to Yehu, in which case he might actually have been a prophet. That would be the simple reading. Others, but often we find the verse saying God spoke to so and so, but it means, and it's clear from the context that it means through a prophet. So here it could mean either one, but the commentaries, of course, explain, as I said, through a prophet, which the traditional rabbinic interpretation is that's the prophet Jonah. But But Yana Asher Tivos, because you have done good to do that which was good in my eyes. Kechol Asher Bilvavi, like everything that is in my desire, Asisa Lebeit Achav, you have done to the house of Achav, B'nei Revi'im. Therefore, for 4 generations of descendants, Yeshu Lacha Al Kisei Yisrael will sit for you on the throne of Israel. Now, this is a very curious verse because there's a lot of backhanded things in this verse that stand out. Number one, it says here that because you have done good in my eyes to the house of Achav. But what about all the other people he destroyed? The children of the brothers of Achaziyahu, those that weren't part of Beis Achav but were just Miyuda Av, just those that knew him. What about the killing of the priests of Baal, which he just did? What about the anyone who was Krovav? We said anyone that was even close or influential in the kingdom of Achav, he had killed. There's a lot of people that a trail of death that weren't Beis Achav, right? So God is clearly only complimenting him for part of what he did, not all of what he did. And then within this blessing remains also a curse. God is also telling Yehu that, and telling him that it's only B'nei Revi'im, 4 generations your house will stand. Right, if you recall, and when that was said in regards to Omri, the house of Omri, that was a curse. Only 4 kings are going to be, but after that, you're going to be destroyed. So Yehu is going to be no better than the house that he just destroyed, right? In other words, maybe had you behaved yourself and done what you're appropriate, you might have remained a king of Israel forever. But because you didn't, right, therefore the kingdom of Israel under the house of Yehu is only going to last for 4 generations. So there's a slight compliment here, but a very careful compliment, which is much more of a criticism than a compliment. In other words, Yehu, yes, you did what you were supposed to in killing the house of Achav, but you went way overboard, and therefore you will not be founding a dynasty that lasts forever. And then, as we continue, we learn V'Yehu lo shamar. Yehu did not keep l'olechas b'Torah Adonai Elohei Yisrael. He was not careful to go in the path of the Torah of God, the Lord of Israel, b'chol havav, with his whole heart. In other words, he went his own way. When a person goes with that kind of zeal, he ends up going way off in the wrong direction. Lo sor me'al chatos Yeravam. He did not change the path of the sins of Yeravam, asher hachtias Yisrael, who led the people of Israel on the path of sin. And therefore, in those days, God began the destruction, what ultimately ended up in the complete destruction of the northern kingdom. God started to katzos, to cut away, to chop away, to cut down the kingdom of Israel. Vayakem Chazoel b'chol gvul Yisrael, and Chazoel, the king of Aram, who was appointed by Elisha, started to strike down and started to attack all of the boundaries of Israel. So Yehu had a tough time, and in his time began a serious decline. Min hayardein mizrach hashemesh, he struck all around, from the Jordan to the east, Eskaler Eretz HaGilad, and the land of Gilad, which is up towards farther north, Hagadi Varovani Vamanashi, in the area of the land where across the Jordan, where the tribes of Gad, Reuven, and Manasseh lived. Me'aroer Asher al Nachal Arnon, V'Hagilad, V'Habashan, all of these areas were being struck by the armies of Aram, the armies of Syria. V'Yeser Divrei Yehu, so that's all we know about Yehu's kingdom. We heard how he came to power, but then when he was in power, it was a big mess and the beginning of the end of the northern kingdom. And if you want to know more about Yehu, this is not a history book of Chol Asher Asaf Chol Gvuraso and all the things that he did and whatever power he had. Haloim Kesuvim Al Sefer Divrei Hayom Malchi Yisrael. Go read the history books. Go read the chronicles of the kings of Israel. Vayishkav Yehu Mavosav. Yehu died together with his fathers. He was laid to rest. Vayikburu So b'Shomron, and he was buried in Samaria and Shomron. Vayimloch Yehoachaz beno tachtav, and Yehoachaz his son became king after him. Vayamim asher malach Yehu al Yisrael, the entire length of the reign of Yehu over Israel, Eser Mishmona Shana b'Shomron, was 28 years in Samaria, which was the capital. And this concludes chapter 10, but I do want to point out something before I go to the podcast I promised you, where I'm going to review a bit of the story of Yehu. And that is that in this entire story, Elisha, the prophet, is completely silent. There's no word about Elisha, which is very unusual. Yehu goes ahead and brings about the destruction of the house of Achav, which you would think is the final revenge of Eliyahu, who was Elisha's mentor, right? God gave Elisha the job of putting in place Hazael, the king of Aram, who was going to be bringing about the destruction of Achav, right? To put in place the Yehu as the king who was going to destroy the house of Achav. In fact, Elisha's appointment was in the context of God telling Eliyahu how the revenge was eventually going to be taken against the house of Achav. So Elisha's entire career was in many ways established in order to bring about the end of the house of Achav. But when it actually happened, Elisha wasn't there. I wanted to bring that about because that's how I'm going to lead into the next podcast, where we're going to discuss this whole story of Yehu, what it means and what happened, and what we should take from it, what lessons we should take from it. Thank you so much for studying chapter 10 with me together. Looking forward to studying the rest of the book of Kings together. Have a wonderful day.